So I'll let Scott start his program, and thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it. Is that the music from downtown that we're
think
hearing?
so, actually.
Wow.
All right, well, thank you for coming to my presentation on Shore Fishing 101, Fishing Techniques and Terminology. We're going to be covering just some basic techniques that may be confusing to some people, and kind of show you how, and I'm going to show you kind of how to set them up, just to make the most out of your shore fishing time when you're out. There are some basic questions that I've heard asked from other presentations I've done, like, what is pitching a jig? How do you set up a walleye rig? It's a technique that my dad showed me how to set up for shore fishing. It works really well for fishing. What is a crankbait? If you don't know, if you haven't heard it before, or like how important is the graphite content in the rod, or the difference between IM6 and IM7 graphite in the rod. If you've come across these in like Cabela's or Shields, it might kind of confuse you as to what it means. And there's lots of other questions out there. Please feel free, if you have any questions during the presentation, to ask away. We're going to go over some basic terminology and gear and fishing itself, as well as go over some different techniques to help improve your fishing success. So what's the deal with modern rods and the graphite content? Rods these days have many different ways of showcasing the graphite content in them, which determines the weight of the rod and its sensitivity. Different brands use different systems to show their graphite content. There's the IM scale that Cabela's uses. There's the modulus scale, which G. Loomis uses, Fenwick uses, and then with the SCI scale, which St. Croix rods use, and other acronyms out there too that most people really just don't need to know. Because in layman's terms, the higher the number, the more graphite, the lighter, more sensitive the rod is. And then you have some brands here. I myself use a lot of Cabela's rods. These are just about all Cabela's rods, except for a couple of these here at the end. But they've all got their own system of how they say, this is a high modulus rod, this is an IM7 rod, and it's just the higher the number, the more graphite it has, the more sensitive it's going to be. As far as the rod's action, the action is described as a rating that describes the amount of curvature that occurs in the blank due to the loading with the weight when you catch fish. There's just some diagrams here. Your ultralight rods, for instance, those are extra fast because they bend at the tip before they bend anywhere else. This one here bends how close that one bends up here. Versus, say, your medium rod, which bends a little lower down, and you've got your medium heavy to heavies. You'll get the full bend in the rod when you set the hook and get a good sized fish on. So the lightning in my rods bends a little bit higher, a little lower down. The moderates or the mediums, like what this one and this one are, you get a little bit lower bend still, and then you got your heavies where you get that full bend in the rod. Pitching a jig. Your first two, just picking a spot out in the water, like say in the middle of a weed patch or beyond some weeds if you're from shore, even if you're just kind of like a canoe or something, and that's where you want to throw the jig to or pitch it to. It's most often done from boats, but I've discovered you can also do it from shore and be very effective at it. You just pitch it out there as far as you want. You bring it back in about 3 or 4 seconds. Give it a little jerk just to what the jigging motion is about, and you let it sit for a couple seconds. And then, because usually a lot of times when it's sitting there is when the fish is going to bite. And you just continue that motion until you cast again. The species you're fishing for will determine the size of the jig you're going to use. If you're on a perch and trout like I do most often, you're going to be using slightly smaller jigs. You're going to use like 32nd ounce to 16th ounce jigs, just smaller ones for the smaller fish. If you start going for larger fish, you're going to use bigger jigs. For like walleye and bass, you're going to use the 1/8 ounce to 1/4 ounce jigs. Especially if you're in a river and you got good moving water, you want to use slightly heavier jigs because otherwise the current will just take your jig down. A couple of different examples here. These are more from Northland jigs. I use this thumper jig an awful lot because that little blade beneath there, when you're bringing it in and jigging it, that blade is spinning. So it's got a little bit more attraction to the blade. So I always like to use those on jigs because of that little flutter blade. Anything to attract with the fish when it's on the bottom is always a good thing to go with. And the rod you use for jigging should be a high in graphite because you want to be able to feel the bottom and feel the fish that's biting. If you're using, say, an ugly stick rod, it's a tough rod. It's hard to break, but you can't feel as much with it. If you got a rod that's, a couple of these rods here are IM8s. Those are really high content. You can feel about everything on the bottom, including the little, especially when you're perch fishing, you'll feel those little nips all the time. Drive you crazy. It's a minimum IM6, but IM7 or higher is best for that technique. Then the walleye rig. The setup is designed to keep your bait off of the bottom while letting your bait swim free to bring in the fish. You need a small bobber, positioned probably about 1.5 feet or so above your rig. You need a snell hook, which is just, you can buy these about bells or shields. Just a hook that's attached to the line already, and then about a 1/2 ounce size sinker at the bottom. Because when you throw it out, this is kind of my basic setup here. The medium rods, action rods are best for this because of the weight of the weight. But when it's down the bottom, it's going to sit like this on the bottom, nice and vertical. Your bait is off of the bottom, so any swimming along is going to be able to come and find it, and it keeps keeps the bait free from the line. This little thing here I have connected here is called a bear paw line leader connector. These things work very well for this setup. Like I said, this is something my dad showed me how to use because it keeps your hook out away from your main line. These are available. You can only find these though on Bass Pro online or at fishusa.com. Belts used to carry them, but they don't anymore, unfortunately. But I highly recommend getting these if you ever get the chance to, because they are nice to have when you are short fishing. And if you can't get a hold of those, you can still do the same thing. All you need is the weight, the bobber, and the snell hook again. And all you do is you take this, you wrap it around your line, throw the hook through the loop, and just bring it in tight against the line. It does the exact same thing. When a fish bites, it's just going to take that. It's going to slide the line down down your sinker, which isn't too big of a deal. But another way to do it if you don't have access to these bear paws. And that's what those bear paws look like. Just two plastic pieces that connect. They just connect them together. And you can come here anytime afterwards to take a look at them if you want to. And then I told you about when you're sitting out there, take another bobber. You're going to have a little slack in your line because you're probably going to put it on like a stand. And as soon as the fish starts biting, you're going to see your bobber, that bobber and the slack start moving out. And that's when you know you're ready to set the hook for your fish. It works really well on most species of fish. There's not very many fish I haven't been able to catch with this technique. So it works really, it's called walleye rig because it works really well on walleyes, but also if you use a little bit smaller bait, like a small worm or a smaller minnow, you can catch plenty of trout and panfish as well. You can catch a few catfish with it too, like my cousin did when we were out last month. And the slip bobber setup. It's a really popular technique these days, so a lot of guys use them fishing for walleyes from the boat. But it's a way to catch fish that are not necessarily on the bottom, but they're lower down, say, using a standard hook and bobber would. You can actually have a little more depth control with a slip bobber setup. It involves a pencil bobber that has the ability that you can go through the line like this. Then you've got a stop that you buy separately. It's just a piece of string that will stop the bobber at whatever depth you determine you want to go to. And then you've got your jig on the bottom, so that when the jig is going down, the line's getting pulled through, and it'll pop up, and you'll be able to see the bobber nice and easily. And so it's pretty easy setup. It's just a matter of getting the slip bobber and the tie off on top. And you can use it with a hook, or just and then you use some split shots weights to put on here to get the line to sink through, or you can do what most guys do when you have a jig. It works very well because you leave your bed there, but you can jig the line so that your jig is always doing this. So you get that motion, and then it stops at that set point. As I said, it works really well for shore fishing that way, and allows you that depth control. Like if you want to go down to 6 feet, give yourself that much room. And with my wife catching a nice perch on the setup. And then your standard catfish setup is very, very basic. All you really need is a three-ring swivel, like here, a good sized weight, about 1 ounce to 2 ounces in size, and then your standing octopus hook. And that's kind of close to what it looks like. Because this is going to sit on the bottom, and that's where you want the catfish to find it. You want it to find it on the bottom, but the setup allows this line to stay away from your main line while it's in the water. I fish up at the Bell River a lot, or in the Underwood, when we go catfishing. And when the water's running fast, I use a 2 ounce weight. If the water is kind of in a slower, like in the end of summer now, it's running a little slower. A 1 ounce weight works really well. It's not as hard to cast. You get a little bit of weight on. Bait I usually like to use shrimp as my main choice, either frozen or left out in the sun for a couple of days to thaw and get really stinky. Or a lot of guys use creek chubs that they can catch up the river. Chicken liver works really well. Rotten meat from your fridge. I've even seen it, heard of guys using hot dogs for catfish bait. There's also dip and sponge baits. You take your hook and you shove it in the gunk and bring it out and throw it out. Or there's manufactured baits these days, like these ones here available from Rip and Lips. They're a bait that you're going to handle without getting your hands all stinky, because you put the bait on the hook, you squish it, and then when it gets in the water is when it starts releasing all the smell. But you can actually handle this without getting all over your hands pretty well. But these are only available online as well, ripandlips.net.
Do you eat catfish?
No, we usually release everything. We release everything we catch typically. Although I have been told that by Kim downstairs, she wants me to keep it coming forward because she eats catfish.
That's a huge fish.
Yeah, that one was 8 pounds. She caught that one. She caught that one last summer. And a couple weeks before this, I pulled in a 12-pounder. So there are some big cats up on the Bell River there north of New Underwood. And shoreline crankbaiting, because that's another technique that a lot of guys will do from the boat, but you can also do it from shoreline, depending on the depth of the water. Crankbaits, also known as plugs, cranks, or hard baits. They're effective lures. They go to a predetermined depth, depending on the ones that you get. Unless you're fishing for walleyes or pike or bass, I usually use 1.5 to 2 inch, 2.5 sometimes inch crankbaits, just because I'm not fishing for big fish, and the smaller baits don't dive quite as deep. When you're fishing from shore, it's nice to have that one that won't dive 10 foot down and get caught every time you're trying to reel it in. If you want to use crankbaits that dive down to 8 foot or less, 3 to 6 foot is the ideal. And all the crankbaits, and you look at the case at the stores, they all have the depth on it, which is what it goes to. This one here is a 6 to 8 foot one right here because of the bill size. But 3 to 6 is, I think, is optimal for a shoreline crankbait. 3 to 4 inches, which one to look for if you're going for walleyes, if you go up to Ormond or down to Angostura. You want those bigger baits that can get down there a little bit quicker. And you also want to make sure that the water is a little deeper too. Points on lakes are the best place to use cranks. I like to go on the leeward side because throwing the crankbait into the wind from shore is not easy and usually doesn't go very far. But I found that I can get just as many bites on the leeward side, and I can throw my bait out further and bring it back. Because I found a lot of fish hanging out right along that backside of the point anyway. And that's just an example of that's a Rapala bait there. Usually different brands and some different varieties of crankbaits. And I said the one I have on here right now, that's a Berkeley flicker shad, similar to this one here, just a different color. Rapalas are really popular. I've got a lot of different varieties here. The middle ones are the best ones because they don't dive quite as deep. This one here is a 3 to 6 foot diver, so it's really shallow because it's got that nice small bill. And the gold color is also a good standard color to go with your crankbaits.
Would you retrieve that at a constant rate?
Yeah, if I'm fishing in the lakes, I typically will just kind of bring it back at a nice speed. Every once in a while, I'll pause for a couple seconds, and then I'll just keep reeling. I recommend using either floating or suspending crankbaits, because if you use the sinker, because when you stop a sinking crankbait, it's still going to go down. So when it floats or suspends, at least if you stop it, it'll either float or it'll stay right where it's at. It won't go down any deeper, which is the hard one. When it comes to crankbaits, is what you want to avoid is going deeper, because you're going to get caught a lot more often. Storm makes a couple of really started making some good crankbaits and some really good colors. This particular color here is called cheap sunglasses. It's really effective on trout. And then Cabela's also makes a good brand for a few bucks less than your Rapala. The blue colors work really well on the trout, and also on the perch when you get the smaller size. This one here is a little bigger that I usually use for trout or for walleyes. This one also, like the other one's only a 3 to 6 foot diver. Your local fishing resources. I like to take advantage of whenever I can. The Journal publishes a weekly fishing report in the outdoors section every Thursday. If you looked at it today, it'll tell you what areas are pretty hot right now. Pactola has got a pretty good trout bite going on, except that it's in deeper water. But the bluegill bite is still pretty hot. So in that case, if I wanted to bluegills, I would use a slip bobber setup. Because usually with them, that's a good technique to use for that. Or you can also go with the you can try and jig if you want to, or you can go with the walleye rig if you're fishing for those. The Rooster Shop here in town is a great local place because you can go there to find information about different bites, where it's hot, and on what, if they're willing to share. A lot of times I go down there, just kind of seeing, kind of ask them if I'm going to a lake. I ask them, if anybody's told them where the bite's hot, what's biting, and on what. And if the people have been talking, they'll be more than happy to tell you where to go. So it's a good resource to take advantage of before you go out. Using lake maps, I like to try and use those when I can. Use them especially in ice fishing, but try and use them more often in open water now because they'll show you the depths and the points that you can use when you're fishing. Because if you find the points always have the deeper water. Good place for throwing a jig or for throwing a crankbait. Game Fish has a good website that is free, so you don't have to, because most of those cards you see in my boats are about $100. But if you go to the website, you can actually have access to a lot of different lakes in the state. Like if you wanted to go, say, to Sheridan, and there's their lake map. You print it out, you can enlarge areas of it. Like when I'm fishing in Sheridan, I like to fish in this area over here, along the 3 to 5 inlet area here, because the water goes down pretty quick. So you can use so that's why I do a lot of jigging there. I don't have to worry too much about getting caught up as much. A lot of guys will fish down here in this marina or in the north marina here, especially for northern are biting. But that's just an example of a good resource that doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to pay any money for these. If you want to go to Bear Butte, where you guys were at, this is your up-to-date depths. So you can see it's kind of a shallow lake, but so it works really well for, say, a walleye rig or just a slip bobber or basically hooking bobber work too. But it's an excellent resource to use, and I always recommend if you want to learn what the lakes look like below, just use those maps because they work very well. And as I've talked about before, selective harvest, catch and release. We practice that all the time because our thought is if you catch the big one, what should you do with it? Do you want to keep it or do you want to release it? Well, it's your decision, really. I mean, nobody's going to tell you to keep a fish or not keep a fish. It's totally up to you. But conservation groups, a lot of local anglers encourage us all to release those really big ones. after taking some photos, of course, because you need those for just for the memory's sake. But the biggest fish tend to have the best genes. They're the ones that survive the longest to get that bigger. So there's something about them that is obviously advantageous to them. We want to keep them breeding into that population, to keep those genes within the fish population. It's important that we try to preserve fishing for future generations by practicing selective harvest to keep the population healthy and vibrant and plentiful, as well as keeping the shores clean. There's a group out there called Recycle Fish that I'm an ambassador for. They preach keep the shores clean, pick up after yourself, keep the don't let your line, the spare line you have, lay on the ground, clean up, practice your selective harvest. And it's a really good organization. I always encourage people to go to the website just to kind of take a look. You can actually, join them for free. You can get packs for $5. You can donate to the organization for $5, and it goes towards helping the organization keep all lakes clean and plentiful. Conclusions: shore fishing techniques can be every bit as effective as boat techniques, no matter what they say. Because I don't have a boat, so this is pretty much the techniques that I use a lot. Is these ones here. With some modifications, pretty much any of your boat techniques can be used on the shore. For instance, like the jigging technique and the slip bar technique. A few modifications. If you know the lakes you're going on, you can definitely use those techniques to your advantage. With those maps, make sure you know the area well with those maps. Go over them if you want to before you go out. Gives you an idea what to look for bays and points are two areas that I always look for on most of the lakes that I go to. And have fun regardless of the size of fish you catch. That's the important thing. Regardless of size, you can still have fun. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me. I have a Hotmail account that I've set up called drauger81. You can contact me for any advice or questions you have on different lakes, techniques, lures, gear that you would like to try, even if you're thinking about and you want information. And maybe even some low-cost guide servicing that I've been looking at doing. So just let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you as soon as I can if you want to email me. Any questions?
Yeah. Those bear paws, you only get those online, you say?
Yes, currently. Like I said, the Cabela's used to carry them, but the only place I've been able to find them now is Bass Pro online or at fishusa.com. They come in 6-packs, and they're about $3. It's $3 for a 6-pack of them.
Yeah.
But like I said, but now I've got a bunch here. I'll be ordering some more because you lose. I treat these things like gold because I wasn't able to find them for almost 5 years. So you lose one here, lose one there, and you start getting a little low. But now I found you can actually buy them from those places now online. So I'll be ordering some. But
And if you don't have those, you use what you showed us there. Right?
yeah, you just use. Just turn the lights.
Yeah.
Just take your regular snell hooks that you can buy about anywhere at Cabela's. And all you're going to do is you're going to take your line where you want it to go. Just run it over.
Oh, okay.
And then you take the hook and you throw that little loop.
Right.
And you just tie it. And you just pull tight. And then it'll stay where it's at, and it'll still hang out off to the side like it's supposed to keep it away from the main line.
How far above the weight is that?
It's I usually go about a foot. If you connect it at about a foot above,
Yeah.
here, then it'll go down to about it'll hang down to about 8 inches below above the bottom.
Okay, about 2 feet zero and bobber.
Out there with the bathroom. Oh. Yeah, and then your bobber, I put that bobber about 1.5 to 2 foot above.
Yeah.
Because most of the time the fish isn't going to be worrying about this.
Okay.
Okay, so this is if I'm still fishing, if I'm just sitting back in the chair down there and just still fishing, this is usually what I'll use is this technique.
Yeah.
Just because it's pretty easy to set up with or without the bear paws.
Like perch.
Oh yeah,
Not
exactly.
shore,
Oh yeah, you'll catch a ton of perch, bluegills, crappie. I mean, you can catch a few trout here and there. Trout are usually patrol in about the kind of the mid area of the water. They're usually suspended, but I'll still catch a few trout on this technique. Catch walleyes if you're fishing for walleyes.
And you like fishing off that 385, right, where that?
That's, yeah, where the parking's at, where the docks are at. I have to go walk down a little bit further, get closer to those cattails are a little further down from there. Because there's usually not people that fishing down there, so you got more space. And when I've been out there, I have a little pontoon that I can float in, and that's usually where I go, is on that area, because those cattails will make a lot of fish. Sometimes big, sometimes small, just depends on the day.
Whenever we short fish, we always get snagged so bad. How do you keep
What are you usually fishing as far as the technique? Are you just throwing out a hook and bobber? Okay. And well, it depends. In that case, how far do you usually put the bobber from the hook?
Well, sometimes we use the bottom, we'll just go practice.
Oh, you're just throwing it to the bottom.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Even no matter what technique you use, if you're going to throw something on the bottom, you're probably going to get snagged up. There's no real way to avoid that, especially if you're going to be jigging, or because you're on the bottom. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're still going to get caught sometimes. If you were to say go fishing at like Sheridan, if you get out past about 10 foot, about the 10, 15 foot mark, it's more of a sandy bottom, so you have to worry so much about it. But when you start bringing it into the shore, you're going to run into the weeds, you're going to run into the algae, you're going to run into the rocks. There's no real way to avoid it. If you're going to jig, you have to accept the fact that you are going to get caught. You're going to catch stuff all the time. It's just a matter of that, those 30 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever you have before you get caught, or you're going to get caught, that's when the fish is going to bite. That's why it's nice to look at the lake maps. You can kind of see where those deeper parts are at. Because shallow water has got more weeds. Deeper water doesn't. You actually have more of a chance of not running into the weeds.
And when you catch those perch on the Sheridan, you use a jig, right?
I use a jig. I use a slip bobber technique if I'm out there. That seems to be the best way I've found to catch perch. Like right now, the last fishing report today said that they were catching perch jigging in about 15 to 25 foot of water, which means they're probably from the guys catching in a boat, more than likely. But if you go to those points, or you go to the Bay Area there, or the northern bite's pretty hot in the Bay right now too. That'd be a good place to go. I mean, this time of year, the weeds are going to be pretty high at Sheridan, especially in the shallow water. But if you look for those points, you go down to the southern part where you got more of those hard edges and deeper water. That's a good place to find more perch, more rainbows, without having to worry about getting snagged up so many times if you're jigging. But yeah, it's hard to avoid jigging unless you're using a slip bobber or just a hook and a bobber or a crankbait even. Yeah, it's going to be tough to avoid getting caught.
So how far from the bait do you recommend a bobber to be?
Well, if you're just using a hook and a bobber, I usually go about 2.5 to 3 foot to start with. And if I'm getting bites, it's good. And I usually fish with at least 2 rods. You're allowed 2 rods. So I bring out the maximum that I can. If I've got someone with me, like I've got my wife with me, we'll bring 4 rods. I'll set, a couple of the rods will be at that depth. Then the other rod will be a little deeper. And then we can adjust from there.
Sure.
Same thing with a slip bobber setup. You can adjust. And the nice thing about a slip bobber setup is you can actually go deeper if you want to. Because all you got to do is move up that stream. Move it up higher, you can go deeper. So if you're fishing, say, 20 foot of water, but the fish are down at about 10 foot, using a hook and a bobber is not going to help you because you can't reel. You want to reel so far before your bobber's going to get caught on the top. Versus a slip bobber setup where you can just keep reeling, and then as soon as you throw out to where you want, that line will sink all the way down to 10 foot, and it's going to stop right there where the fish are suspended at. That's why I like to use that technique these days. It's a little bit because the fish tend not to swallow the hook as bad. Because you get that when you're fishing with just a hook and a bobber. If you have a jig, they at least grab the hook, but they won't get it down and go too far. But it allows you that depth control. You can get out there a little bit further to cast.
Can I look at that slip bobber?
Yeah, here. Yeah, please feel free. I fish at, my favorite place to fish are at Sheridan. I like to fish in the hills for the most part. So I usually go for panfish and trout. So I use a lot of different setups. And actually, another technique, if you're looking at doing a little more casting, if you don't have the crankbaits, I recommend using spoons for instance, like this one right here is a really great trout lure. It's called a little Jake's. All it is just it's a U shape, and it has a really nice motion in the water. Works really well with Sheridan, Sylvan, Canyon Lake. If you were just here fishing here in town, but it works really well. It works really well for trout and northerns. This is my favorite color. Is this gold with the red dots. And this is the small size it comes in.
Look at this.
Small size it comes in here. Otherwise, my favorite lure to use for trout, or as far as a casting lure to use for trout and perch, walleye, and northern, is this Northland buckshot spoon. It's a heavier spoon, so you can really cast it out there. But it's got a rattle chamber in here with a couple of BBs. So when it's going through the water, it's making that noise. But that's if you really want to go to lure for casting for perch and trout, that's the one to go with. The gold color I think works the best. Like on this rod here. This is my favorite color. It works the best as that gold color. But you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with that, especially for trout.
I gotta write this down.
Go right ahead. Well, if you ever want to try like catfishing, for instance, catfishing, like it's pretty easy with a simple setup. We go out there, we put on the bait, we throw it out, and then we sit in our chairs. It's easy. It's lazy man's fishing, and we usually fish in the dead of the night up until 12 o'clock, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on the fish are biting. But we'll use the weights, we'll use bells. You can hear it when the fish hits, you're going to hear it.
How wide is the bell?
I haven't now. Let's see. It's you can't cast across it right now. It's probably a good 100 yards wide, depending on where you go, of course. We usually fish just a little bit downstream from the bridge that crosses the river there. Sometimes I'll go up a little further upstream because there's a couple of deep pockets there that have a little bend in them, and that's where I caught that 12-pounder last year. It was sitting in that little swirling pocket.
What's your setup for a catfish again? Which one?
That's this one right here. That one just involves a three-way swivel, a good size sinker, and then an octopus hook. Because when you're fishing for catfish, the octopus hook sets itself because of how the hook is shaped. Because if you try and set this hook, all you're going to do is pull this hook out of its mouth. Because when you pull it, the point is still pointing inwards, so it's just going to slide right out of the fish's mouth. This way the fish catches itself when it starts running, and then you just grab your rod and start reeling. Although I do recommend getting holders for them that will not let your pole go away, because last year I almost lost a rod because it was sitting on just a simple setup, because somebody, I won't mention who, wasn't paying attention, and my rod was starting to tip over to leave the stand. But I got it just in time, and it was about a 5-pound cat. I was on the other end. And then last month I was fishing with my cousin, and I almost lost another rod, and it went fast.
And that's a three-way.
It's called a three-way swivel.
Three-way swivel.
You connect one line's where you connect your line hook to. The other side's where the sinker goes. So it's really easy. Just cast it out, and you just sit and wait. Just make sure whatever you're using that it stinks, or has some good taste to it. That's what the cat likes. So I like to use shrimp, and I let it sit out for a couple days so they get good and stinky. Yeah. Other guys use chicken livers. A lot of guys use chicken livers, but I just prefer shrimp because I can keep them in a bag and keep the scent contained. Or I use these, which work pretty well if you don't want to get your hands all dirty on stink bait. Yeah, these ones here that I got at Cabela's, you just attach them to the top of the rod here and just screw this thing down. That way when the fish starts moving, the tip starts going, you'll hear the barrels going. Catfish is a lot of fun, even though it's pretty much it's the lazy way of fishing. But if you get it about a 10-15 pound cat, against the current. It's a lot of fun. It's a good fight. They're good fighting fish.
Now, this is your walleye setup.
That's the walleye rig, yep.
And you can use a three-way.
No, this is, well, you can use three-way if you want to, but I recommend you just tying this directly to the line or using these bear paws.
Yeah, fair part, yeah. Either that, okay.
Yeah,
Going through his stuff, yeah. He's got a lot of stuff too.
This is only about a quarter of my rods. Last presentation I had, I brought 10 here. That was half of the collection.
Basically,
Do they have this beer pong at the Bass Pro Shop?
Actually, we were just down in Omaha, and we went to the Bass Pro there. They didn't have that anymore. And they said, they probably told me their stores were not carrying them anymore. They don't want them.
Oh, okay.
That's why these things are so precious to me, because they're so hard to get a hold of these
Yeah,
days.
because we're,
And this is what I have, what I currently have is all in here now.
because we're going to Colorado Springs and they've got a Bass Pro Shop there.
Well, what you should do is, if you're going down there, call ahead, ask them if they have them. They're called bear paw line meter connectors. They're probably in their fly fishing section. That was where they took me when we were down.
Roosters don't have either.
Roosters in there. I've looked everywhere in town for these. Used to get them built in Shields too, but they don't carry them anymore.
Line.
Yeah, they have 9 meter connector. It's usually in the fly fishing section, is what they told me. That's your different sizes of octopus hooks. I usually use that. That's a 3/0 size. It's a little small. I can take little chunks of of shrimp or chubs if I haven't been on there. If I have big shrimp, then I go to the 4/0. Just for a little bigger hook, but I try and stick with smaller size. Yeah, they're really good. Some guys do use them for regular fishing too, besides catfish, because the fish will not swallow this hook. Because they come a lot smaller, but because of the shape, because how it's bent in, they have to actually get themselves caught first. They can't just come up here and grab this whole thing and swallow it. They have to actually come and grab it and kind of tip it like this so that that point catches them. So you get a lot less fish falling in the hooks with these. You just have to fight that urge to set the hook whenever you see something, because you'll pull the thing right out of the mouth.
That's called octopus.
That's not supposed to get. You use a regular fishing, but I use it for catfishing. Just because of the style that we use for catching. Throw it out and that's it. Yeah, you can go ahead and look around. I've got more boxes here. You can pull stuff out. Take a look. Your different size jigs in here. Like these bigger ones, like I said, more for walleyes and bass. This is a 3/8 ounce. I use this for on the river, and then currents run pretty fast. It's a 10-year jig. But I usually use smaller stuff. I use the 16 ounce, 32nd ounce. Blades are always nice to have. They have that extra shine around if you're going to try that for the bottom. And you got so many different kinds. You got your flat jigs, which actually work pretty well for not getting caught because of how they sit like that. They sit like that.
Oh, okay.
So the hook is pointing up instead of down, catching everything. Might be an idea for big guys who are looking at trying something like that. Because that's not really how they sit. And Northland came out with some jigs too that are kind of the same way. They sit like this with the hook actually off at the bottom. And these are Cabela's swallow jig. You jig them, they roll back and forth for a little more. It's a little more action. So my favorite one though, the Northlands with the thumper jigs. I really think they're just the best ones to go with. They'll sit a little bit off too. They've also got this thing here to keep your bait from falling off all the time, especially if you're using worms. They'll hook the worm there and keep your bait from falling off. Looking there, we'll grab the thing here and we'll draw for the.
Yeah, remember, that's my thing, that always sets this up.
I knew.
Okay, I think I have it out.
So we're willing to go out and use, that's the one we use a lot, is that It's good, so it's easy to set up, in case you have anything with it. All right, this is for the $15 one. Robert,
Yes,
all right, that's for you.
thank you.
All right, who's gonna get the 25?
Okay.
Ruth. Oh.
There you go. You're welcome.
That's why I take her,
She's the lucky one, right?
Oh, thank you.
No problem. Go there and buy some stuff.
Thank you, Scott.
Not a problem at all.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, glad you guys came out.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Any nice